Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Production Arts Opportunities. This episode is focused on the production team. The theatre hierarchy is really important as it shows who's in charge of what elements and the order of responsibility within the company. It is really important that they all come together to create a cohesive and successful production. At the top of the hierarchy is the producer. They oversee all parts of the production, making sure that everything runs smoothly. They will then hire a production manager and a director. The director controls all the artistic elements of a production, creating concepts and a vision for the overall production. They are then in charge of the stage managers, choreographers, musical directors and the dramaturg to make sure that they are all portraying their vision correctly. The director and the production manager are both in charge of all the designers. These are sound designers, set designers, lighting designers and costume designers. These can also include lighting and set designers being audio-visual designers where they design the projections if they're used in the production. The dramaturg will also work with the designers as they need to make sure that the research that they have carried out, the designs match this. Otherwise the production may be set in a particular time period but the set might not match what the dramaturg has researched and then given to the actors, and this will not create a cohesive production. In some productions they may have a technical director that will also be in charge of the designers, but sometimes the technical director is only in charge of the running crew and the people that keep the production going during the production phase where the designers are no longer there. Underneath the stage manager is the deputy stage manager, who is in charge of calling the show, and the assistant stage managers. Underneath them are the stage hands that are a part of the running crew. Underneath the choreographers you have a dance captain who helps teach the actors the dances that the choreographers have created with the directors. Underneath the music director you have a conductor, and underneath them are the musicians of the orchestra. The other people the director are in charge of are the actors, and the actors work with everyone in the performance section. This includes the stage management team, the MD, dance captain and the dramaturg. They all have to work together to create a cohesive production. These are all part of the performance team. All of the designers are a part of the design team, also known as the creative team, as they are doing the designing of the show, creating the director's vision. Underneath the designers are the people who build the designs that the designers have created, and the people that keep the show running during the performance phase. These people are also underneath the technical director. These include costumers, scenic constructors, scenic painters, sound engineers, props masters, LXOcs and many more, including hair, makeup, the running crew for every department. Being in the running crew are like props masters, fly cues, props runners, and many other people that work in the shows during the actual performance, when the creative team have left the process after Tech Week. These people are all come as part of the technical team. Without the hierarchy, people will not know what their roles are and what they have got to complete, and who is above them and below them, and who is relying on them to get their work done, and this might affect them. This will result in everything being very unorganised and the whole production process being a nightmare, as no one will be in charge and no one will know what they need to complete by when and who is relying on who to get each job done. This is how the dramaturg works with other members of the hierarchy. The dramaturg works with all the designers and creative team to make sure that their designs meet the research that the dramaturg has carried out, making sure that the research matches their designs and therefore matching the director's vision, creating a cohesive concept and therefore not being confusing to the audience. If the dramaturg does not work with the designers, then the designers could be designing something that does not match the time period of the research that they have carried out and what they have worked with the actors doing. This means that they will not match, which would not be good at all, as it will make the audience very confused when it comes to this. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Production Arts Opportunities. This week we are focusing on the stage management team, an in-depth study. As looked at last week in the production hierarchy, there is a hierarchy in the stage management team, starting with the stage manager, then the deputy stage manager underneath, and the assistant stage managers under them. The stage manager supports and organises all of the backstage teams in a day-to-day running of the production. They are there from the planning phase all the way through till the get-out at the end of the production's run. They communicate and liaise with the whole company, making sure that everything is organised to ensure that the production runs smoothly. This means that they are very important to the production process, otherwise there wouldn't be anyone to organise everything, therefore the production wouldn't run as successfully. The stage management team are in the production process through every stage. In the planning and organisation phase, the SM makes sure that they have a place to hold auditions, that the audition room is set up how the director and the casting director require it. They also hold meetings with the directors and the designers to make sure that all of the designs are matching the director's vision, and making sure that everything the director requires during the planning phase is accounted for. In the rehearsal phase, the SM will be setting up the rehearsal schedules, liaising with all the theatre departments to gather information, liaising with the production manager regarding budgets for the production and for each department. They will also be sorting props and any furniture that is required, leading a mark out in the rehearsal rooms and arranging for costume fittings and wig fittings, along with a lot more tasks. While the SM is doing this, the DSM will be writing all the cues in the prompt copy and writing down all the blocking creating the Bible. This is very important as they need this to be able to call the show later on in the process. In the get-in/fit-up stage, the stage management team supervises and helps out in any ways that needed. This will be different for different fit-ups for the different productions. In the tech rehearsals, the SM and the DSM run these, making sure that the DSM is writing down all the cues into the Bible so that they can call this during the production. Also, the SM will be organising the ASMs, making sure that they are doing their jobs correctly, which can vary from production to production depending on the requirements for that show. During the dress rehearsal and production phase, the SM will supervise the ASMs, making sure that everything backstage runs smoothly, while the DSM is calling the show, cueing all the technical departments. This job is really important as if the DSM doesn't call the show, then the technical departments will not put their cues correctly, and therefore the show wouldn't run smoothly. In the post-show, the SM will write up a show report to give to the director, production manager and producer, stating everything important that happened in the show, including running times and any notes that needed to be addressed. At the end of the production run, the get-out, the ASMs, DSMs and SMs supervise and help out with whatever is necessary at that moment in time. Again, like the get-in, it really depends on production to production and what needs doing when. There are theatre legislations for stage managers, including one called the Stage Management Association. This protects stage managers when working in the industry. Health and safety is a massive part of being a stage manager, as they have to write down all of the risk assessments and make sure that everything is safe for the whole company, from the actors to the stage hands. Keeping them all safe is all down to the stage manager. Hello and welcome back to this episode of Production Arts Opportunities. In this episode I'll be looking at the progression routes and the opportunities that there are in the future. In this chapter I'll be looking at the different routes you can take within stage management to further develop my skills and to get to the next level in my career. Whether it's going straight into employment and what opportunities there are with that, or further developing my educations by going to drama school, university or getting an apprenticeship, I will be debating which is the best route within my job as a stage manager during this video. The job opportunities, however, are different for each sector within theatre. These sectors are design, technical and admin/management. As a manager, our job role comes under admin/management but can also come under the technical, but there are very specific ways to make sure that you're taking the next step to developing my career as a stage manager and to further my education. One of these ways is freelance. Freelance is when you're self-employed and then hired by different companies to complete certain tasks or work on specific shows. You work to a specific contract, whether it's short or long term, which states the amount of time that you'll be working on this project, and then once your contract is over, you'll move on to a different job. Most of the time these jobs will be with a different company and working on a completely different show. The advantages of working freelance within a theatre is you being able to network with more companies and developing your contacts so that you can then work with them later on in your career. And you'll be able to get your name out there. If you have a good reputation, you might be able to further work with the same companies again, or using the contacts that you gained in previous jobs. This then means that you have a wide variety of jobs that you can do, and you might, once you're successful, you can choose which jobs you want to go to. The disadvantage of going freelance is that it's not reliable work, as you might be working for a company for 9 months on tour, but when the contracts run out, you are not able to get another job for another 6 months. Therefore, have to go 6 months without any income or on a really reduced income. It also means that your income is really unstable, as you can have a job and then not have a job, not having a steady income, and having to then sort that out for your own tax. Within stage management, if you go freelance, then you'll have to put a portfolio and a resume out onto websites like mandy.com, where industry professionals look for specific people to work on specific jobs. This can also mean being hired by touring companies on a contract for a tour, going to receiving houses, being a DSM, SM, or whatever you're hired as. This is good for a stage manager, as you're working with different companies and networking within the industry and creating a good portfolio of work and a good reputation, where eventually you will not have to wait for jobs and you can go straight into an employment. Once you have proved yourself in the industry, you might be approached by an agent who wants to represent you. This then means that you will no longer have to find the work, but the agency will find your jobs, meaning that you will always have a job to go to once another one has finished. An example of a freelance stage manager is Samuel Evans, who's best known for being the technical stage manager for Dusk, the UK tour. He started out by being an ASM in 2016 for the show The Thing at the Fuel Theatre. He kept on working from job to job, from a company to a company, working his way up the stage management ladder, starting off as an ASM and eventually being the production manager of UK tours, which he's doing now. So this is a living example that a stage manager can go through freelance and gain experience and work their way up the hierarchy, as he's now working professionally in the industry. Direct employment. Direct employment is different to freelance, as you are hired by a producing theatre and will work all of the shows normally for that season. It is still contracted the same, but you will be working for the theatre for however long your contract states, and then will be working on all the shows that they produce for that amount of time. This is a more stable job for than freelance, as you know you'll be working with the theatre for the amount of time that it states on your contract, and that you will have shows to work on during that time, as the theatre will always be producing. However, as you are only working on that theatre, you will be working with the same people and therefore not networking with anyone else in the business. So once your contract runs out, and if you wanted to work on something else with a different company, you don't have the same contacts that someone who's been working freelance will have, so not many companies will know how to contact you, and therefore you haven't actually got your reputation out there as a good stage manager. Direct employment relies on working within a theatre that is a producing house, where they produce their own shows and you will work throughout the season on those shows, being a part of the stage management team. For example, the Rep Theatre in Birmingham. They have a team of people who work on their shows as a part of the stage management team for the shows that they produce that season. This is then different to a receiving house, as they have tours come in and use their own stage management team that are on tour and use the theatre to hold their productions. Therefore, these theatres will not have a stage management team, as the stage managers come from the tour, so there's no point employing someone to do that job, therefore wasting money. An example of a receiving house is the Birmingham Hippodrome, as they receive tours and host them, therefore not needing an on-site stage management team. Within stage management, direct employment would mean being hired by a producing theatre and working on all their shows during that season as a part of the stage management team. This would be good, as it's a stable job and you get to know that you'll be working on the shows that are being produced there. Again though, you don't get the contacts that you might get if you're working freelance, and not get as many networking opportunities. Jenny Northern is a stage manager for the Birmingham Repertoire Theatre. She has been there for 2 years working on the shows that they are producing there, with a stable job and a stable income. However, she did not go straight into the employment, as she had an English language and literature degree from the Open University. She worked there and is now hired directly to the theatre, proof that being hired to a theatre can work for some people. Education, drama school versus university. Getting further training in stage management, you can go to either a drama school or university. The main difference between drama school and university is that a drama school is more practical based, and you will have more hours on site with tutors with more hands-on experience working on the shows, whereas university is more research based with more independent study time to complete the research tasks, and less time with your tutors and less time working on shows. Also, when you go to drama school, you're expanding your connections as companies come to drama schools to get in contact with people to work on certain shows, as they know that they've been trained under the show pressure that will be in a theatre. However, at universities, you won't have as many connections, therefore meaning it's harder to get into the industry after having your degree. Some of the courses that you can do at drama school is at Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, doing a BA Honours in Production Arts in the Stage Management pathway. The other drama schools that offer BA Honours of Production Arts is LAMDA and RADA, along with many other drama schools. An alumni of Guildhall on the Stage Management pathway is Danny Newton, who graduated in 2017 and is now working as an ASM on Dear Evan Hansen in the West End, more proof that this route can get you into the industry. Some of the courses you can do at university include studying a stage management degree, including the University of Lincoln and Birmingham City University, along with so many other universities. However, many of these are drama degrees and not separate stage management degrees, or even technical theatre degrees. They all come under drama. Overall, I believe that drama schools are better than universities for going into stage management, as you get more connections and get more actual hands-on experience of working in shows and working in the industry. This means that when you actually come to being employed, you're used to the show pressure, therefore making you more employable. Apprenticeships. An apprenticeship is where you get paid to train and learn while you're working on the job. However, you enter as a level 3, which I'm already currently training as, therefore I'm not developing my skills further. But what does draw people in is the money, as you get paid to learn, and depending on what your apprentice is, you might have a guaranteed job by the end of your apprenticeship. Also, apprenticeships are good if you want to specialise in certain areas. Within stage management, there are ways to get apprenticeships is being hired by producing theatre, and then you can train on the job while working on the shows within that season, earning a proportion of a normal salary. However, you will not be paid the full salary. But due to the nature of stage management, an apprenticeship isn't really the best option, as you need to develop your skills further, and as I said before, the level 3 is what we're currently training as now. You don't either get an opportunity to network with the other companies, as you will only be working within the theatre that you are the apprentice for. To conclude, I believe that the best option to further developing my career as a stage manager is by going to drama school to do a stage management degree. This allows me to get further training along with hands-on practical experience of being a stage manager for these shows. This then lets me further develop my skills, but also allows me to network with industry professionals, allow me to get my name out there and hopefully find a job freelance with touring companies, or starting as an ASM and working my way up in theatres. This then makes me work up the hierarchy, as seen in previous episodes. Our trade union within the production arts is BEC2. This is really important to be a part of whether you are freelance or working within a theatre, as they can give you legal representation if you were to be paid wrong, have unsafe working conditions, or even if you were to get injured at work and it wasn't your fault. Therefore, this is really important that all members of the production arts teams are signed up to this union so they can get the legal representation if needed. Chapter 4. Interrelations between departments. What is interrelation? Interrelation is how you work within each department, for example, the lighting designer and the deputy stage manager, and how they communicate to make sure that there's a cohesive and successful production. This is really important as each department's designs need to come together to create a cohesive production that matches the director's vision, as if the costume designs are from one era and the set designs are from a different era, they will not match, making it confusing for the audience, therefore ruining the illusion of the production. It is also important for the hierarchy, as each job role works with people above and the people below them on the hierarchy to create this cohesive production. Also, they have to work together to make sure they get in their jobs and specific tasks done in time for the production. Sectors. As I covered in my last video, there are 3 sectors within the production arts. These are the design, technical and admin/management. These sectors then work together to create a cohesive production that meets the director's vision. This is really important as they need to communicate to make sure that these designs match what's happening in the tech and what the designs are actually designing is realistic and can actually happen. Otherwise, the designs might not actually have the same limits as what the tech has, therefore they design something that's physically impossible. When it comes to tech, it won't be able to happen. Therefore, we'd have to fix it during tech, wasting time, which is really crucial as tech is so time pressured. Stage management comes under the admin/management sector. However, they work with both of the other sectors. They work the design sector to make sure that they're getting all their designs done before the deadlines and the designs are matching the director's vision as they communicate through the director and the designers communicate through the stage manager. It also needs to make sure that it's matching what the stage manager is seeing in rehearsals, again making sure it's matching what the director is doing during rehearsals. Stage management then also work with the tech team, as when they are in the production phase and the designers have left the process, the production team will be working only with these people to make sure that the performance is successful and the show continues to run as smoothly as possible, making sure that the show maintains the professional standard that is required. The DSM mainly works with the technical team, as they are calling the show, making sure that the LX operators, sound operators are doing the job successfully as possible, making sure that the cues are going at the correct time once the designers have left the phase, meaning that during the production phase when the designers have left, the DSM will only be working with these technical people. Now let's take a closer look at the stage management team and how it works with the lighting designer from the design sector. During the planning and organisation phase of the production process, the lighting designer and the stage manager will be working closely together to make sure that all of the lighting designer's plans are meeting the director's vision. It is the stage manager's job to make sure that all the designs are what the director requires and that the lighting designer is always matching their vision. This means that there needs to be a lot of communication between these two teams, as the stage manager needs to make sure they're communicating clearly with what the director requires to the lighting designer. While the lighting designer is making the plans, they need to be communicating with the stage manager to make sure that it's fitting not only with the director's vision but also making sure that it fits in with all of the other departments' designs, as the stage manager would have been communicating with all of the other departments as well as the lighting department. Without this consistent communication, the designs might not fit together and the lighting might not fit with the director's vision. This then means that it will not come together to create a cohesive production. During the rehearsal phase, the stage management team and the lighting designers need to work together, as the DSM will be attending the rehearsals, creating the rehearsal blocking as well as rehearsal reports. This means that the lighting designer will need to communicate with the DSM to make sure that the lighting designs are fitting in with what's happening in rehearsals. This also means that the lighting designer needs to know where the actors are standing in each scene, meaning that they need to communicate with the DSM to make sure that the blocking that they have written down are fitting where the lighting is happening. This also is especially important while they're doing pre-visualisation. If they're not communicating and working together throughout this phase, then the lighting designs in the visualisation for the show might not be lighting the correct areas of the stage, meaning that they won't work when it comes to tech, as the actors won't be lit. This means that it will be taking up more time during tech, as we will have to redo this previs and making sure that the actors are actually lit correctly. This then is making sure that it's taking up a lot of time in already a really time-pressured phase. During the get-in/fit-up process of the production process, it is really important that there is constant communication between the lighting designer and the stage management team. This is because during the LX fit-up, the lighting designer will be communicating their vision plan to the rest of the technical team, who are helping with the fit-up, which can sometimes contain people from the stage management team. So there needs to be a constant communication to make sure that they are all rigging it exactly how the lighting designer requires it. It is also important that the stage manager and lighting designer communicate throughout this process, as the stage manager is overseeing the entire get-in and fit-up between every department, and they would have created a schedule for the day to make sure that everything is done on time. This means that the stage manager needs to be making sure that the LX fit-up is sticking to that schedule and being done on time. This means that they will need to be constantly communicating with the lighting designer to make sure it will be done for when the schedule says. Without this communication during this phase, the rig could be done wrong and the rig might not be done by the deadline that is set on the schedule, meaning that it will push everything else behind, and it will mean that we might not have time to complete the entire get-in by the deadline required. During the technical/dress phase of the production process, the lighting designer and the deputy stage manager work really closely together, as the DSM needs to put the prompt copy together while the lighting designer is teching the show. It is really important that they are constantly communicating and working with each other throughout this, as the DSM needs to write down all the numbers of the LX cues and making sure that they're calling it at the correct moment so they can put this in their prompt copy. But it also needs to make sure that they're calling it at the right moment to match the LD's vision, but also the director's. The DSM may have to change certain cues and where things are being called, as the designer will give notes, as really important that the LD designer tells them if anything needs to change, because cues can change throughout tech, either adding them in or changing when they're called, to make sure that it's matching the LD's vision, and if they don't communicate this, then it won't get across to the SM. It is also important because the stage management team lead the dress rehearsals, and therefore, if the LD needs to retech a certain scene, it's important that they communicate this to the DSM or the SM so that they can make sure that they have time to retech that scene, meaning that it's really important that if they need to redo that scene, that they tell the DSM so they can make sure that scene is redone. If the stage management team and the lighting designers were not to communicate, then when it came to the DSM calling the show, it would mean that the cues were in the wrong place and that the cues wouldn't be numbered or would be numbered wrong. This then means that when calling the show it would completely off, having a huge impact on the overall show, as the LX cues will all be wrong and will be at the wrong time or will be having the wrong numbers. This will then make it really hard for the LX operator, as if they were calling the show, they won't know what cue they're on, meaning that they could think they're on a different cue than what they were supposed to be, as the LD has not communicated with the DSM to write these numbers into their prompt copy. Case studies. An example of a show of how the LDs and the stage managers work together is Come From Away. This is due to how many lighting cues there are in this show. The DSM really has to be communicating with the LDs to make sure that all these cues are being called at the correct time and all the cues are numbered properly in the prompt copy. Also, due to this show having loads of other cues happening at the same time as LX, including sound, follows and many others, it is even more important that these cues are being called correctly and that the numbers are even more correct, as the LD and the director need to be happy with when all these cues are being called. Also, it could get confusing with other departments if the numbers in the prompt copy are being called wrong. Another example of this is Beetlejuice on Broadway. The lighting designer must work so closely with the stage management team, as the stage manager, Matt DiCarlo, has to make sure he's writing down all the cue numbers and the cues are called correctly, so that the LD, Kenneth Prosner, requires them to happen at a certain moment in time. But this is particularly important for Beetlejuice, as there are so many cues and calls within one transition. And this includes all the other departments and not just the lighting department. And if the LD hadn't communicated what numbers the cues were supposed to be, then the lighting operator could get very confused about what cue they're supposed to be on, therefore making the calling and the operating aspect of the production so much harder. And if they are on the wrong cue, it can then have a huge impact on the overall production. To conclude, it's really important that all the departments within the production arts are interrelated, as they need to all work together so much to create a cohesive and smooth running production. It is particularly important in my job role as a stage manager, as you are the one liaising with the director on behalf of the production team, and therefore you're the one that's having to make sure that the communications between the director and the rest of the team is happening. Also, you have to make sure that you're getting the director's vision across to the designers and making sure that each department are working together to create that cohesive, successful production at the end of it. Thanks for watching. Hi, and welcome back to this week's episode of Production Arts Opportunities. This week I'm going to be talking about the evolution of stage management, from the history to the future. The role of a stage manager has been around for many centuries in different forms, and in this video I'm going to be explaining the history of stage management and how the role came around, as well as discussing where it's going in the future and what possible threats there are going to be for stage managers in the future. I'm also going to be talking about how theatre legislation has changed and how that has impacted on stage managers at that moment in time. History of stage management. The term stage manager wasn't used until the 18th century, however previous to this there have been loads of evidence that shows how the role developed over the time. One of the first pieces of evidence of a role that's similar to a stage manager is in the Middle Ages, where there is evidence of a conductor de secret who oversaw the collecting of money and was a prompter backstage. Due to there being very little time in the rehearsal process of these productions, the actors could never remember their lines or the blocking of where they had to stand on the stage, so they had a prompter backstage who would have the script in front of them and would cue the lines to the actors, as well as cueing the blocking of the show, as they had that written down into the script as well, which is one of the first variations of the prompt book, which deputy stage managers still use to this day. From the 14th century to the 17th centuries, the actors and playwrights handled the financial, directorial and stage management duties themselves, as productions were not that complex and the development of the other areas such as lighting had not happened yet. This then meant that there was no point hiring a completely separate team to handle these duties, as they could do it by themselves and the company wasn't getting enough money as theatre wasn't that popular back then. In the Elizabethan era, during Shakespeare's time, the role of the prompter was split up into two roles, the stagekeeper and the bookkeeper, which both had different responsibilities, as the growing popularity in theatres meant that productions were having more props added and they were getting more advanced, meaning that playwrights and actors could not handle the work themselves, so they needed to hire extra people in to help run the show. The responsibilities of the stagekeeper is the maintenance of the theatre, taking props on and off stage and the security of the performance space, meaning that it had to be quite physically strong, whereas the responsibilities of the bookkeeper was to keep track of the stage script, also known as the book, obtain the necessary licences for the productions, as licences now became a massive thing, due to legislations of needing licences to be able to perform certain plays. Also doing the notations in the book regarding entrance and exits and ensuring that all props and effects were cued on time. This was a really important event in the timeline for a stage manager, as it was the first time that someone else was hired who wasn't an actor or a playwright to organise and help with the management of the performance, even though during Shakespeare's time these were young boys who were trying to learn the trade. At the start of the 18th century, the term stage manager was actually used, due to the fast-growing popularity of theatres, meaning that companies had more money and the fast advances in complexity in theatres, companies started to hire a team of people, again, young apprentices normally learning the trade, to complete these additional tasks for the theatre, including queuing all of the other areas, making sure, for example, sound goes at the correct time. This meant that many of the stage managers would have to upskill and learn how to do all of these additional tasks with the rapidly changing technologies that were being added into theatres. The stage managers would have to adapt to advance alongside the advancements within the theatres. In the early 19th century, due to the success of theatre, they now also hired an actor manager. This person was normally a leading actor who wanted to set up their very own technical company. Their responsibilities were to manage the company's financial arrangements, as well as occasionally taking over the theatre's management. They are also controlled all the elements of direction to design to the stage management, which over time has now developed into the production manager. In 1929, there was one of the first evidence of an assistant stage manager, Preston Sturges. He was hired as an ASM on Antonietta Perry's production of Going Home, as he tried to call all of the cues but kept on mixing up the lighting cues with the lightning and thunder cues. Therefore, Brooke Pemberton hired him to gain more experience and help out backstage organising props, which is still a major part of the role as an ASM. Therefore, with the additions of assistant stage managers within theatres, there was a new area of skill that now needed to be required to be a part of the stage management team. You now needed to help out with props, possibly knowing how to build and source props, meaning that ASMs and people within the stage management team really had to upskill and learn the additional skills to keep up with the ever-changing developments within theatres. Calling over time. Calling is still a massive part of the stage management team. However, back in history, they didn't use a prompt desk. They had different ways of queuing people. In history, the way the prompter or the bookkeeper would queue is by whistling, therefore creating the saying, "Don't whistle in a theatre," as this was their means of communication. These whistles were how people knew when certain sound effects or to move certain scenery or put certain props on, meaning that if an actor would whistle when they weren't supposed to, the sound designer could think that that was their cue, and therefore the cue would be wrong, going at the wrong time. The reason why we still have "Don't whistle in a theatre" nowadays, even though now technology has advanced so much where stage managers do not whistle to cue things anymore, the saying has still stuck. However, with the fast advancements of technology, we now have communications devices, and the DSM has an electronic prompt desk where they can both call the cue vocally through cans, which is a communications device, or they can cue it with the lights that are on the prompt desk, in case communications go down normally. So the way that the DSM or the bookkeeper back in those days would call a show has really advanced, and you no longer need to know how to whistle to be a stage manager and to call a show. However, the saying, "don't whistle in a theatre," has still remained. With the additions of communication devices such as cans, this meant that the stage management team would have to learn the new way of calling, using lights and vocal calling. This means that stage managers would have to upskill to make sure that they are calling using the prompt desk rather than whistling like they've had to do previously, meaning that they would have to upskill considerably. Present day stage management. With technology quickly advancing, the job roles within the stage management team have now split up into separate sectors, as you need members of the team with specific skills to complete specific tasks. The modern day ASMs are still organising the props, but now are using automation to move the scenery on and off stage, meaning that there's less need for stage hands and they're becoming less and less important, as it's now being programmed and being moved at a push of a button to get the exact right spikes every time, meaning it's more accurate than two people pushing it on or carrying it on to try and hit these spikes. We also now have wireless cans, which is the communications device I mentioned earlier. And even these are developing. The communications are now wireless, meaning that DSMs can communicate with all departments from anywhere in a theatre, therefore meaning that they can cue all the other departments from somewhere away from their prompt desk. This now means that the DSM isn't restricted to staying at the prompt desk to communicate with other departments, meaning that they're a lot more flexible, so if they're needed somewhere else they can still cue people from wherever they are. Also, present day DSMs can also cue the lighting and the sound etc. by the click of a button themselves. Some of them don't have to call a show anymore, as they can just click a button when they need to, according to what their prompt copy says. They will still have the cues in the prompt copy as they need to click the button, but they do not need to communicate this through to the LX operator or the sound operator anymore, as they could just do it themselves, which is easier and also saves the company money, as they do not need to hire an LX operator and a sound operator separate. The DSM will cover all of these things. This is also important as the company no longer needs to hire separate lighting operators and sound operators, as some deputy stage managers don't need to learn how to call a show from the prompt desk, using the lights like they would have had to before, as they will no longer need to call, as anyone won't be operating the show, they will be operating the show. This advancement also means that there's less likely to be an issue due to communication, as the stage manager does not need to communicate with the operators to call, as again, they're doing it themselves. Stage management in the future. In the future, there might not be a need for a deputy stage manager to call a show. This is because cues are becoming more automated where you can time code your cues, and this means that you do not need a deputy stage manager to sit in front of a prompt copy and call the show. This then means that it's being done more automatically, where it can be done at a push of a button to start the show, and the rest of it is just hit by time codes. Also, visual cues could be done by sensors that are on the stage. However, you may still need a stage manager to go into rehearsals and know where the actors are going to be going on stage and when the cues need to happen, so that this can be programmed into the software correctly that is going to be doing the automated calls. They also may need to have someone who can call the show in case the technology breaks and in case the automated calls aren't working. This may be that someone needs to still be able to cue and still need to know when all these cues are meant to happen, meaning that you may still need a prompt copy. This does mean that a stage manager will have to develop their skills and learn how to timecode cues, as they will need to know how to program these cues together during the tech, based off the notes that they made in rehearsals, meaning that their job will be constantly evolving and becoming more of a technical job, knowing how to timecode cues, including the timecoding of lighting and sound. Another thing we may see being added into theatres is the advancements of sensors on stages for visual cues, as at the minute you required a DSM to call a cue when an actor has got to a certain point or position in the stage. However, in the future, with the cues being time-coded, I also think we'll see the development of censored staging, where the stage detects when an actor has got to the certain place on the stage, and the cue then goes automatically. Again, meaning that there's no need for a DSM to be sitting at a prompt desk calling the visual cues, as this will be done automatically. This also means that a DSM will again have to upskill advancements with the technology, learning how to program censored staging and learning how to fix censored staging when it breaks. However, I do still believe that we may need a DSM to still have the cues in the prompt copy in case during the performance the technology breaks and you need someone to still be able to call the visual cues that the stage was doing before. but it will be less required skill for DSMs, meaning that DSMs will really have to upskill in more of a technological way. The job role for an ASM will also change, as they do not need to physically move the set on and off stage anymore. This can all be done through automated tracks. However, you may still need ASMs backstage to organise handheld props and make sure that all the automation is working correctly, meaning that it will be more of an engineering job. In the future, there will be less need for ASMs that are strong to be stage hands, and more need for engineers who can fix the electronics in the tracks and the automated systems when it breaks, meaning we're moving away from being more physically skilled to being more technologically skilled, and meaning that the skill level of ASMs is going up, meaning that ASMs will need to be more trained and more skilled going into the job, rather than ASMs starting at the bottom and working their way up like they are now. This means that the assistant stage manager or stage hands will need to develop their skills, as they need to be able to fix automation for when it breaks, or learn how to program automation, as it is developing quickly, and if a stage manager or stage hands do not advance with the technology, then there will be no job role left, meaning that they'll be unemployed. The development of theatre legislations. With the rapid developments within theatre, more and more theatre legislations have had to be added and developed. This is due to the fast advances in technology within theatre creating more health and safety risks, but also due to some job roles changing and no longer being needed. Some of the legislations are no longer have an impact on the theatres, as the risk is no longer there, meaning that the health and safety for that risk is no longer relevant for the current time. One of the legislations that is still relevant today is Theatre, Health and Safety at Work Act of 1973. This was brought in as the majority of injuries within theatres was due to manual handling and working at heights, which are both massive parts of being an assistant stage manager. This act brought in the rules that theatres had to follow and procedures to make sure that they were keeping its crew safe. However, due to the rapidly changing technologies in theatre, there is now automation which is taking the place of manual handling, meaning that this legislation will need updating, or a new legislation will be needed to be put in place due to the health and safety risks that are used during automation. And more technology can bring more new legislations, as more and more health and safety risks will be brought in. This shows how legislations will be changing within theatres, while the theatres are advancing to make sure that they are keeping up to date with all of the rapidly changing health and safety that will be happening within the advancements of the new technology, meaning that more legislations will be have to put in place in the future. The theatre is a rapidly changing thing, with new technology being developed every day. This does mean that job roles like ASM and stage hands will move away from the traditional way of being completed. For example, manually pushing scenery onto a stage and moving to more technical roles like fixing the automation that is moving the scenery. But as long as all stage management teams take the opportunities to upskill in areas and advance with the technology that is advancing, then there should be employment opportunities for every stage manager. As even though the job role is moving away from tradition, it will still be a job role in the future, but it will be more technically based rather than being more physically based. Thank you for watching.